How well will Brock Glenn play against the Clemson Tigers?
You are Locked On Seminoles, your daily podcast on the Florida State Seminoles. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back into Locked On Seminoles. I am your host, Brian Smith. Thank you for making this your first listen each and every day. Truly appreciate you stopping in to talk some Noles football with me. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet and you'll receive $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Yes, the biggest question from this game for me is not whether or not Florida State beats Clemson. Hint, they're not going to. It's how well Florida State's new quarterback, Brock Glenn, plays, and to an extension of that point, how well other freshmen and sophomores play. I've said it before during this week in preparation for Clemson, this game probably isn't going to be close. If you think that Clemson is going to come in there and lay an egg and Florida State's going to surprise everybody, good luck to you on that. Please don't gamble if that's what you think. However, again, this is about the long term of the program. Florida State is in a state of disarray, and they need change. We've been talking about it for weeks. They need to play the young quarterbacks. Well, now they are forced to do so with DJ Uiagalelei out of the lineup. There are a couple ways that I want to look at Brock Glenn, and I'll mention Luke Kromenhoek as well. I know he's probably going to get some reps too. That being stated, stats are the easiest thing to look at, but I think there are a couple other things that are very important. No matter what the score is, no matter what quarter it is, no matter the down or distance, doesn't matter where they're at on the field. Body language, how he adjusts after a bad play. Everybody has bad plays. Even Joe Montana in his prime, Dan Marino, Peyton Manning, didn't matter. Everybody had a bad day, bad game, bad play, whatever. How do they perform right after that? It's critical. Everybody watches the quarterback, just like we are. Everybody, including their teammates and their coaches, the media, the fans in the stands, and of course those watching on television, are going to be grading Brock Glenn. Fair? No. Reality? Yes. Quarterback is the most unique position in all of sport. He is now in the headlights at one of the most prestigious college football programs of the country, and he's going against Clemson. Not exactly, shall we say, the easiest thing. But from what little I know of him, from being around him at Elite 11 in Los Angeles a couple of years ago, there are some positives. Number one, he's used to being in the spotlight. This is a kid that was originally committed to Ohio State. This is a young man with offers from across the country. This is a young man that had the chance to start against Louisville. This is a guy that had the chance to play for a team that was undefeated. It's not like it's his first rodeo. First start this year, absolutely, but 2023 counts as well. That being stated, here are a couple other key points that I want to bring up about him and how I think I would attack it. Again, I can't speak for Norvell and their staff. They certainly get paid a lot of money to do this themselves, but this is what I would do if I was going out there and saying, Brock, here's the football. You're starting the game. This is how we're going to attack. Take it again. This is just my opinion. I think 75, maybe even 80% of the time on first down for the Noles, you'll see a short pass, a screen, or a run. They are going to avoid turnovers like the plague, and everybody in the stadium, including Clemson's defensive players and staff, know it. Therefore, it's going to be hard to consistently, shall we say, drum up big plays. Unless the guys, just something I've been calling for weeks, the skill players for Florida State got to make more guys miss, in this game especially. That being stated, Lucas, Terrell, some of the guys they've had in the secondary, they're very, very talented. I don't know who all is playing. Clemson's been banged up a little bit. But if they're healthy against Florida State, it's going to be a rough road to hoe because the D-line, linebacker, and secondary levels, all three have multiple NFL players in the next year to 2 years. Not one level, not two, all three from freshman class to senior class. They got guys. This is still one of the best defenses in college football from a physical standpoint. They haven't played quite to that level yet, but again, they've been banged up. And I don't think they've been that motivated after the Georgia game. They played pretty crappy against Georgia, but it's Georgia. Now they're let's be honest. Florida State kind of started the real downfall for Clemson last year because they stole a game from them in Death Valley. They're going to want revenge. It's a rivalry game, and Florida State's down. Those guys are going to come with every ounce of energy possible, like they're playing Miami, like they're playing Georgia, like they're playing Alabama. We're going to find out real quick whether Brock Glenn and the rest of the Noles on offense are ready. So screens, short passes, and runs. I really hope, and I cannot stress this enough, that Florida State staff has enough confidence in Brock, and I have no idea, that they're going to literally put in several new plays that Clemson cannot scout. We have never run these before. That's how concerned I am about the first quarter. Clemson staff with Dabo, they're not going to miss. Formations that you've run this year, they're going to know it. Formations, you might have a little bit of an alteration that you ran this last year, they'll know it. Brock needs advantages that are schematic. I hate putting that on coaches, but let's be honest. Clemson has the advantage by a mile here. If you don't have some schematic advantages with plays they have not run yet this year, at the very least, it's going to be hard. It doesn't have to be like earth-shattering plays, but they need to scheme some open receivers where guy is just flat out buck naked, wide open to get the crowd into it, to give Brock some confidence in the first 5-10 minutes of the game. I know I'm asking a lot, but you're a decided underdog. If you don't do that, this game could be over by the end of the first quarter. Give that young man some confidence. He's got an arm. He's mobile. And again, like I said earlier this week, he is more mobile than most give him credit for. He can run RPO. He can run quarterback draw. He can get outside the pocket and make something happen. That being the case, he's still not Jordan Travis. So again, scheme some things up. Secondly, to that point, they've just got to be able to run the ball between the tackles. Come hell, come high water, they must, on first down, all but tell them, we're going to run the ball. You can't do anything about it, which doesn't make any sense for me to say, considering Florida State has been complete garbage at trying to run the ball this year, but they better figure it out in this game, or it's going to be like 21-0 going in the second quarter. You cannot be behind the sticks with a guy that's got barely any experience against Clemson's secondary. That will end horrifically. He's got the talent, but again, I don't care what quarterback you have. You got a fifth-year senior like Jordan Travis, you're not going to be consistent on 3rd and 8 against Clemson. You're not. And Clemson has, again, the secondary that can do different things. They'll probably play a lot of man. They might change it up a little zone. With Brock back there, I would probably play a little more zone and try and change the things after the snap to get some freebies on the interception side. And that's a good possibility they will. But this is a defense that has literally 2 or 3 corners that can play in the NFL that have at least some capacity to play man defense at an elite level. So I'm not sure what they're going to do. I'm up in the air on that. But when Brock sees man, which is obviously easier to read, they got to be able to hit plays down the field. And that really comes down not just to him throwing the football, but that also comes down to something that hasn't happened enough this year. The receivers winning 50-50 balls. And by the way, tight ends too. I know I've been very harsh on Kyle Morlock. He's deserved it. Maybe he makes a play. Maybe it's Landon Thomas. Maybe it's Amari. I don't know. Somebody has to make some of those plays. And they still have Tofili, who's honestly just as good a receiver as his running back. And then Ja'Kai Douglas is probably the offense's MVP to this point in the year. Somebody's got to make some plays. Maybe it's Brown. I don't know who it is down the field, because they're not going to just dink and dunk 10, 12, 14 plays down the field against Clemson based on what we've seen this year. So those are some of the things. I also expect, because remember now, they only have 2 quarterbacks right now that are truly on scholarship. If Brock gets hurt and Luke is in the game, he's a true freshman. He's nowhere near ready. And then who's the backup? They have Trevor, but he ended up walking on. He's not ready either. I would like to see Brock run around quite a bit, but they're not going to do it that much, in my opinion, because of fear of injury. You can't be down to 1 scholarship quarterback and you're in the middle of the season, especially if it's a true freshman. That's another disaster they need to avoid. So that's why I think they're going to max protect a whole bunch. 6 and sometimes 7 guys will be in there. Throw it away. Don't take the sack. Don't take the hit. I know that sucks, but if they just go 5 against Clemson, who brings a lot of different pressure, he's going to get smacked around quite a bit. I think that Florida State staff knows that just as well as everybody else. It's not that difficult to figure out. And we're going to see Clemson come after them, but have to earn it. They might get picks, but I don't think they're going to get as many clean shots on Brock Glenn as you might think, because they have to change up the pass protection. Let's be honest. Florida State's offensive line has been way below expectation this year, and I'm being kind. Don't put them in that spot against TJ Parker and whoever else is. I mean, they got a bunch of big guys there, massive at defensive tackle. Don't put them in a bad spot and put them on an island 5-on-5 Maybe they bring an extra hot. If Brock doesn't see it, he gets rocked and he's out of the game again. Max protect. Take it for what it's worth. Finally, RPO. This is something where he matches up very, very well with what the entire staff has been known to do since they were at Memphis, and then they came over to Tallahassee to coach the Noles. He can do it. That should simplify a few things, a couple basic reads, whether it's the outside linebacker, whether it's the nickel, whatever they're trying to get an isolation on, you'll figure it out. A few motions to find out if they're in man or zone. You'll see some things like that. Pretty basic. Brock's a second-year player. He's been in this kind of offense before. Shouldn't have a ton of problems with it. When we come back, we're going to talk about his stats and a few things that are kind of, shall we say, related to it, because I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the other Florida State freshmen and younger players. I want your opinions about this. That is next when we come back to Locked on Seminoles. All right. Hey, NFL fans, you can start the season with the big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of a game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. All right, now, if you want to think about the opportunity to score points against Clemson, again, you got to hit some shot plays, got to make some guys miss, scheme some things open. This concept of 15-play drive, 75 yards sounds great, and I'm sure in coach speak, that's what they're going to talk about this week because that's what you want to do. You want to shorten the game. But is that realistic? Not necessarily. That's why I think some of his stats will be pretty modest with a caveat. At some point, just law of averages, I think Brock Glenn is going to hit some plays down the field, and Luke Kromahawk might as well be thrown into this mix. I don't want to give a stat line for him because I don't know how much they're going to split reps, but I'm going to guess this is my projection, if you will, for Brock, and I think this is pretty modest, and I think it'll be a pretty bad day overall for the offense, but it's Clemson's D against a redshirt freshman, 14-23 at 60.9%. He's a more accurate quarterback than DJ, 145 yards, a touchdown, and 2 picks. I expect at least one really bad interception because he's a young quarterback, and then one that's either a deflection or just a tremendous play by a Clemson player because they recruit elite players. That's pretty much standard stuff for a young quarterback going against a team that has more talent than you do, especially as poorly as the receivers and tight ends have played for the Noles. If he throws for over 160, 165, I would think that would be very, very surprising. I do not have confidence. The caveat I was talking about is I think they'll hit at least one shot play, like a 40-yarder or something like that. Maybe it's Benson. Maybe it's Amari down the seam. I have no idea. I think they will let his arm showcase itself. He's got a pretty good arm. He can throw it down the field. Maybe they hit something. What I'm concerned about is another kind of stat. How many definitive direct shots does he take? Because they're going to sit back and throw the football down the field. You could roll right, roll left, try to buy a little time. But that's a stat I want to see at 0, and I know it's probably not going to be. Again, they cannot let Brock take many shots in this game. Luke is the only other scholarship quarterback. That's a very dangerous scenario to be in. Next, in terms of stats, what do the receivers do, especially the younger guys? Does Hakeem get in and make some plays? We know Ja'Kai Douglas is going to. By the way, he's been a dog this year. Hats off to Ja'Kai. He's a heck of a player, and congrats to him for balling out. He might get a chance to go to the NFL draft camp. Despite not being the biggest guy in the world, he's been really good. I'm curious, though, anybody else, younger players, even a redshirt sophomore, one of the linemen or something, I want to see the younger guy. I know that's not what this is supposed to be, but Florida State's 1-4, and they're not going bowling. They're not going to a bowl. So let's find out what the younger guys can do. And this is an interesting topic, but I was listening to Bud Elliott show, the Nolecast, earlier today, and he was talking about, he had discussed, I don't know who it was with. He's obviously not going to give his sources, but why not play some of the younger guys? And the person he's talking with is like, well, if you really think about it, one of the things that the entire staff in the Noles, Norvell, beginning with him, has to worry about is if you play the guys that aren't the best in practice, what does that set as an example for next year? And that is a true statement. It's very similar to what I talked about earlier this year, but that doesn't mean you can't work guys into the game. Just because older players start doesn't mean he takes every rep at O-line, at tight end, at receiver, whatever. They've got to play the freshman, Elijah Moore. Guys like that, they got to get in the game. You're not going to a bowl. You're not going to get all those bowl practices. Freshmen and sophomores must play, especially when this game gets out of hand, and it will. Freshmen and sophomores must play. And I'm not talking about the final 5 minutes of the game. Let me be definitive. In the first half, they must play. That is a stat that I'm going to be looking at when I go back through the game, participation chart, finding out when they played, what kind of downs and distances. I might do a deep dive on that if enough guys get in the game. They have to get those reps, man. You got to get your butt kicked to get better. It's part of football. And I'm curious to see what Florida State does with that. Also, what's the effort like? Just as a little bonus here, just popped into my head. If the game gets down to, let's say, the middle of the third quarter, Clemson's up 21-3, and Florida State just can't move the ball. Let's just say that happens. What's the effort like across the board? Special teams, defense, and offense. Are there any quitters? That's something else that was on Elliott's show that he was talking about on the Nolecast, and it's something I hadn't really brought up. But it may only be a few guys, but he thinks there'll be a few guys that'll opt out at this point if they've only played in a couple games, whatever. Maybe some guys basically quit on the team is another way I would put it. He didn't say that, but it wouldn't shock me. If this game goes awry, body language, I mentioned that earlier with Brock, I'm not worried about the quarterbacks. Young guys know they got a future at Florida State, especially the older guys. Will they be bought in if they're getting housed in their own house? I don't know. That's a player by player, circumstance by circumstance kind of deal. And it's more prevalent now in college football. It's not a Florida State deal than it's ever been before. Kids play for the NIL. Kids play for trying to get the NFL instead of what's on the helmet and what's on the jersey. It's just reality. So I'm curious to see which players for the Noles come out, put up, whether they're getting beaten down or not, and just play with good effort, good technique, play to play, and give it their all. Do I think that's really going to happen? I don't know. I'm a little leery to think it'll be 100% good if they're getting housed, like 21-3 in the middle of the third quarter is not a good time, but it could be worse than that. If they're down like 35-3, I'll be shocked if they're on a few guys like that. And if people want to be mad at me for stating that point, feel free, but I think that's the way it's going to be. Final point here, Florida State fans that are going to the game, good for you, but again, be realistic. This is not a game that Clemson is going to lose. Barring them turning it over like 7 times, I think the defense for Florida State will play hard, but they're going to be left out to dry probably quite a bit, meaning they're going to have to play out of the 60 minutes. The defense will be on the field at least 35 minutes, if not 38. That's really hard, and you'll probably see them fold in the second half in the Florida sun. That's my guess. Anyway, I truly appreciate everybody stopping in once again to talk some Florida State football with me. Truly appreciate you talking football in general, because we're to the point of year, the next month or so is as football heaven as it gets. Pods in regards to some national stuff too, recruiting, etc. But thank you again. Hit that like button, hit that notification bell, subscribe, and comment on this podcast. We'd love to hear what you got to say. I will talk to you again on Friday for Prediction Friday and the final score.